Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Passing Notes from Revolve Capital Group. I'm Bob Repass, and I'm joined again by our CEO, Chaz Guinn. Chaz, how's it going today?
You know, it's fun to see all the different dynamics in the market and to be able to kind of shoot the breeze with you about it, right? And really to be able to dive into some of the ingredients we're starting to see kind of hit in the mainstream in terms of products and different products that we're starting to see. So we're having fun staying busy, man.
Absolutely. And it's hard to believe it's already April. And, we're rolling right along, and we're seeing a lot of good stuff coming across the desk. And we've got a lot of good things planned in the future. And one of those things is, we at the beginning of the year, we sat back and said, what kind of marketing and conferences, do we want to plan on attending? And, we've done market updates and we've done case studies on these podcasts. And today I thought, why don't we have a guest come and join us? And we're going to be one of the title sponsors at the upcoming Diversified Mortgage Expo, known as DME 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee. And so we're going to have the host of that conference, Mr. Nathan Turner, join us. So we're going to talk about his journey in the note business and then also talk about his upcoming conference. So let's bring on Nathan Turner. Hey, Nathan.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Great, thanks. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. So tell us, where do you join us from today?
I live just outside of Calgary, Alberta in Canada. So just right, if you've ever heard of the Calgary Stampede, biggest outdoor show on earth, I think that's what they call it. Yeah. And I'm just right outside of that.
Well, awesome. Well, I know both Chaz and I have known you for quite a while, and, we're somewhat familiar with your story, but we want to make sure the audience is as well. So how does a guy in Canada get in the note business in the U.S.? Tell us a little bit of your backstory.
In life, it's just all about being in the right place in the right time, talking to the right people. And that's kind of the case here, where I had networked into, a friend, and he had networked into a group of investors who had bought a portfolio of properties, mostly centered in the Midwest. Excuse me. But the problem was that they had bought this portfolio in April of 2007. So right when the market was peaked. So they way overpaid for this. It was supposed to be a deal where they were just going to flip it out to somebody else. That deal fell through. So by the fall of 2008, when everything was really going crazy, our charge then became to just do whatever we could. So that was kind of my introduction into the world in a roundabout way. What we ended up doing was selling these houses on terms. And we kind of thought we'd invented the note business. we a couple of really smart Canadian boys. Oh yeah, and we figured we figured this out for the first time, and of course started learning more about it. Started going to different conferences and meeting some of the people that were in the business, and I was blown away at how big of a world this is, how big and how small it is all at the same time. And it's just been quite rad.
Niche when you were starting to elbow your way into large sellers. At the time when I was running a different fund, I just felt like you had this really cool email address, and yours was the Canadian note guy, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to get your attention because you're thinking, hey, we've got maybe a clientele over the border per se, but is he looking to buy in a bigger fashion? Is he looking to scale? And you got our attention, and it's cool that you've been able to create this niche right over your journey. Yeah. So how has it gone from, the post 2008 crisis, right, of probably when you started learning about the business? Let's walk through a little bit of like when that happened to, your journey as to where you are today, leading a conference and bringing, different voices in the market so that folks that are looking to diversify and come into an alternative investment opportunity, you're providing a platform for them to learn about it, right? So just curious on your journey from the start of back then to where you are now.
Oh boy. So like I say, when we first got started, it was creating notes. And honestly, we didn't even know that's what they were called. My old partner and I, we just called them contracts. We had no idea.
Sure.
So we started doing that. And then I went to my first note conference, 2009. met all these people and went, oh my goodness, this is a thing. People do this. And learned that they were called notes, figured out that what we were doing was a thing, and we could improve upon what we'd already done and do it better. And then, it's just a matter of it. I can't stress enough how important conferences have been to my growth in this business. So I went from, creating these land contracts in Ohio, and then learning about non-performing notes, and started buying non-performing notes in 2010. And then Chaz, that's right about the time that you and I met. And I started buying these non-performing notes and working those through to whatever end. So it was either fixing them up to resell, in other words, rehabbing the note, getting the reperforming, or in those days, many of these non-performers were on vacant properties. So I would work to getting title to the property, and then we could either resell the property on terms, or just wholesale it out to somebody else that was going to handle it locally. So, and then all the while going to different conferences every year. I started speaking at conferences 2014, 15. And I realized what an important thing that was to be able to get out there and get known. And again, as the Canadian note guy, that helped me get noticed, I think. And then most importantly is just doing what you say you're going to do. So I would go in and buy these notes and make offers, and then follow through on the offers. And really, that's all it takes. And then just started working them through and growing and growing and growing. So up until just last year was a bit of a change year, where I actually took over the Diversified Mortgage Expo. I figured the only thing better than speaking at a conference is hosting a conference. And then at the same time, we also launched a fund. So now we're raising money for that fund as well. And so that's kind of been the progression over the last 15 years or so.
Awesome. Well, we're joined today by Nathan Turner, and want you to make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our podcast. And Nathan, you kind of mentioned there at the end about moving into the fund management side. So
Yeah.
How are you kind of positioning yourself and your fund in the market today?
So, we're just looking for people that are looking for a good, solid passive investment. If you want to do this hands-on, absolutely. And that's what I do. And I love it. And I encourage that. At the same time, if you look at it and go, man, this is a really great business, but I don't have the time or energy or any real push to learn the business. And once you realize that there's work involved, then yes, that's what I'm here for. I'm there to give you as much of a predictable investment as I can, it all secured by the real estate to increase safety.
Nate, I think it's important for folks to hear this, is that you started out, though, as a buyer, a creator of mortgages, seller financing them yourself, but then that kind of morphed into you buying your own assets, cutting your teeth, creating your own track record, really understanding the nuances of really how to take a non-performing note from this stage and really actually complete it through the foreclosure, auction, REO, fix and flip type of strategy, all the way through owning cash flowing assets. I think I appreciate the approach of, let me get into the game myself. Let me kind of do this so that as I begin to passively syndicate and raise capital, right, I can speak to the investor from, firsthand knowledge that I've really worked through all these systems. Is that the approach? Don't let me speak for you. Is that the approach that you felt like you took as you kind of segued the business into becoming a fund manager, that you really wanted to get into understanding the nuances of running the NPL and RPL business?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's so important. Again, you can go to these weekend, warrior conferences, and you can learn a little bit about notes, just enough to be dangerous. But there's really no substitute for actually getting in the trenches, working it through, understanding what some of those conversations look like with a borrower who's in trouble, and how to help them get through it. What are some of the different options that you have available to you, and how can you pivot based on different situations? So it's really important to have that experience so that you can know what you're talking about and just know how to navigate any given note that you're presented with.
That's just a big point that me and you are always talking about. We see these folks that have, sold their businesses, or they're potentially in retirement and they've got self-directed capital, and they're like, hey, I want to diversify. I want to get into a potential passive investment, or I also potentially want to be an active investor and do this myself, right? And so, sure, I think there's two different lanes you can go down. I do see that if folks want to bring in their friends or their family or their potential business partners into this business, you always see that they want to get into this first. Let me do this myself. Let me kind of understand how working with a servicer, working with an attorney, and all the different nuances it takes to actually manage loans on a national basis. And then it's like, okay, I'm starting to understand a little bit more of the moving parts and how to make sure that you're not allowing the timeline for liquidation of assets to carry out forever and ever. That's always kind of the leakage issue we see in this business of profits kind of seeping out. Right. But I appreciate, your journey is what we talk about internally, especially to our clientele. It's if you start buying one asset that then kind of morphs to 3, and then now it's up to 7, right? Now you're starting to understand all the different nuances that it takes, and it starts to become a bit more comfortable to the point where syndicating, fund managing, and then now owning and operating a Diversified Mortgage Expo that's bringing hundreds of people throughout the country to Nashville, Tennessee.
Right. Well, I think from the
get on down now. Get on down.
Yeah. From the passive versus active investor mentality, right? If you are in the position where you have your capital that you want to deploy, but you don't want a job, and you really don't intend to raise money, from other people, then probably a passive investment into a fund, is the path you're looking for. However, if you down the road want to get family and friends and raise money, they always want to know, like,
did you do it?
Did you do it? Have you actually done it? Does it actually work? And that's the point where you buy 1, you buy 3, you buy 5. All of a sudden, you got a 20-note portfolio with a track record. And then it's like, oh, yeah, I've done it. And it's much easier to raise capital that way. Yeah. Before we get into the expo, Nathan, what do you think as far as the economy today with the interest rates where they are, inflation, affordability, the climate we're in is how do we raise capital? Like what kind of pushback do you get, or what kind of story are we telling in order to tell investors that this is the right kind of investment?
So there's a couple of things. I know for the past little while, one of the things that's been really popular for people to invest in is a multifamily syndication. Those can be great, but there can be some hangups with that as well. Number one, is it going to be cash flowing right away? Or is that something where you are going to make your money at some point in the future, 5-7 years down the road, after they've built it, after they've started to sell off some of these units? A lot can happen in that time. And the other thing that I'm seeing is a lot of these multifamily guys got started and their initial loans came from banks at 3%. And now all of a sudden they're at 7% as those rates have adjusted. And I talked to a gentleman just the other week, and he said that he invested into 2 multifamily syndications, and both of those are now currently in foreclosure. And just because times change and costs change and outcomes change. And so it's important to recognize one of the things I love about notes is when I'm buying a note, I'm not buying a predicted income at some point in the future, predicted, some kind of a turnaround, maybe at some point after all these things happen in the correct order and have the correct expenditures. What I'm buying is an already set term sheet. So they've already agreed, the borrower has already agreed to pay X amount at certain interest rate for a certain amount of time. And when I'm buying notes, I'm buying ones that have already been performing. So they've already established themselves as paying customers, if you will, people that are living in their house. With that in mind, I'm stepping into a cash flowing asset, and I can predict with fairly good accuracy how well that's going to perform into the future. So the safety around a note to me is so much greater than even just buying a property. Property values can go up and down, this, that, and the other. When we buy something for a note, we're already building in equity. in case of some kind of a, correction in the market or anything like that. We're building in all kinds of protections already from the beginning on a cash flowing asset. So to me, that just makes such a difference. So it protects against whatever else is going on in the economy, whatever else is happening with inflation. To a large degree, that doesn't matter. We're just getting into something that's already established.
Awesome. Well, as you know, I spent 10 years putting together a conference, Nerd Expo.
Yeah.
So I can understand all the great times and all the last minute changes. So
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to say, when you decided a year plus ago that you were going to take over DME,
Yeah.
what were you thinking?
Well, here's what I'm thinking. So if you go back to their conversation earlier here, where that experience in handling a note and managing a note, and then 5 notes and then 10 notes, that's crucial. And you've got to have that experience. The other side of that coin is you've got to know the right people. You've got to know who you're buying from, first of all. Who's going to be helping you manage that note. You can't do it by yourself. You need a servicer, you need attorneys, you need people that are going to help cut the grass when somebody moves out of the house or whatever, and it's left to just start to rot. So there are so many different partners that you need in this business. So it's partially, you need to know how to manage that note. And then the other half of that is just making sure you've got the right people on your team. So as I have gone to different conferences and met different people, that has been a huge part. And then as I was approached with the opportunity to take over DME, to me, I was like, you mean I can have that many more connections and I can have that much more credibility as I approach people? 100%.
Yeah, Nathan, I think that any conference, the importance is the ability to connect, not only with
Yes.
other investors like-minded, but also the service providers like you just outlined, and then the educational content that you're able to get. And I know you have full panels and great presentations, and we're looking forward to being a part of it.
So I hadn't been to Nashville in my first time ever. I've been to almost every major city across this country, and the first time I've gone, I was like, okay, this is bachelorette heaven.
Yeah.
21-year-old heaven, right? But I've also noticed that there is business and a lot of folks fleeing the West to kind of really establish their businesses in this area. I'm sure you kind of sensed that when you brought the conference to the area. So tell a little bit about why Nashville and also the diversity in folks that will be in attendance at the conference.
All right. So a couple of things. Absolutely. It is a very fun place to be. Anytime I've ever talked to somebody about where the conference is, I tell them Nashville and they go, oh, I love Nashville. That's the first thing anybody says. So that by itself has been just a huge, huge part. So I'm very happy about that. Part of it for me, so I lived in Montreal before, and then I would go and which is East Coast time, and I would go out to like Vegas or California or something for a conference. A 3-hour time difference is a killer. It's a killer. So it was very important to me. I'm trying to get this done for people. I want people to come, not just to attend a conference and get pumped up, but to meet people and actually get together and have meaningful relationships form there. So no more than a 2-hour time difference for anybody. Something central that's easy to get to. It's very drivable from, Ohio, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma. Like so many people can just drive there rather than fly. So that was important as well. And then Nashville has just been such a boom town. It has just been growing like crazy, like you mentioned, Chaz, where it's just a place people are flocking to. So business, new building, all kinds of business coming into the city, which is just fantastic. The airport is being built out. They're expanding and growing. So it's a good place to be just for that.
We're gonna have some fun too. I think
Yes.
you threw a really cool curveball into the sponsorships this year. I know you were going to touch on that, Bob.
Yeah, it's always good to attend the conference, especially when you have fun events where you can get to know people outside of the meeting rooms or the exhibit area. And when we were looking at attending and sponsoring, we wanted to do something that was a little out of the ordinary. It would not only support the conference, but it would promote Revolve Capital. So this year we're going to be the sponsor of your second annual axe throwing competition. So tell me, how'd you come up with this idea, and what can people look forward to?
Absolutely. So that was one of the other criteria for me, is it had to be a place where there was an axe throwing lane. There was a place where you could throw axes.
That was a must, right? You needed that.
That was a must. Had to happen. And part of the reason is my brother-in-law actually invented the sport. And so that's my claim to fame through him, is that he's the one that came up with the idea of the sport. And so I wanted to support him in that way at the very least. But I have also done it several times, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a way that a lot of people can get together just in fun circumstances with no pressure. Nobody's really good at it. It's kind of like bowling that way. Nobody's really good at it, but it's just a blast. It's just a lot of fun to do. So it's low key, low stress, lots of fun. We do business with people we know, like, and trust. So I want to foster different activities where we can get to know and like each other. The trust part, that's up to you. But at the very least, we can get to know and like each other.
Look, us
so
too.
That's important.
Us too. We want to be able to see clients and not a traditional. You see the plug there. Look at him looking good.
That's the stuff.
Now he looks like an axe thrower.
Now he does. Right. Give him a beer and he's good.
There you go. So
maybe I'll grow it out. I don't know.
There you go. The whole beard as well.
Yeah. So this is the night before the conference actually kicks off. And Nathan, you don't have to participate in the axe throwing competition. You can come and be a spectator and still get to meet everybody and be a part of the fun activity. But if you do want to participate, then you sign up and you're ready to take your, I guess, what do you get, three throws?
You get to throw 3 axes, and you rack up whatever points you can. However close you get to the center is different amounts of points. But yeah, it's actually limited to only 50 competitors. So if you want to compete, make sure you get that sign up earlier rather than later, because it will fill up all the way. And then after that, just come and watch. Come and just be a part of the scene and come network together.
I'll tell you.
Chat.
Speaking of signing up, make sure you sign up for DME. It's May 31st and June 1st in Nashville. The link is below, where you can just click on that link and register to attend, book your hotel room, and first 50 people who sign up for the competition will be there. And
that's included in your ticket, by the way.
Awesome. So real quick before we wrap up, I did want to touch briefly on social media, because I know you've really taken a charge as far as reaching out to folks via Facebook. And real quick, some of the pros and cons of how social media impacts the note business.
Oh man, in the note business specifically. So I have taken more of an initiative to really step up my game with social media, and I've avoided it for a long time, but now it's time. It's a really great way to contact a lot of people, put out a lot of information in a very short time, which can be the challenge as well. There is misinformation everywhere, and social media, of course, is certainly one of those places. Misinformation about notes and how to do it maybe incorrectly. With most of the time, I think it's just people that are well-meaning, but they just don't know what they don't know. Again, come to a conference, learn how to do it correctly. People that are creating notes, we love them. That's a big part of who we're trying to invite to these conferences. Come, because man, we can do a lot of business together. Create your notes, sell them to somebody who's buying notes, somebody like me or to Chaz and Bob. We're looking for you. We want to buy your notes. So come so that we can buy your notes, and also come so that you can learn how to do it correctly, so that you can get the most money for that note after you've correctly established it.
Again, Diversified Mortgage Expo, May 31st, June 1st in Nashville, Tennessee. Again, the link is below. Make sure you click so you can learn about who's going to be there and kind of the content that's going to be shared. I think you touched on one item that I feel like is kind of, the fabric of this podcast, Nate, is that we want to be able to have every folks across the country and globally to feel like they can actually get to know you through video. And the best way that we've seen that as a platform has been social media. And to your point, there's been a lot of, fakes and folks that are really not, doing this full time. And this is where I feel that, Bob and I are trying to make a lane for this business of folks that are actually in it, buying, underwriting, modeling, managing, disposing, right? Marketing for it, and really kind of that business in a box that we preach, but actually doing it and bringing that to the viewer. And we feel like you're doing the same. So we're stoked for the journey that you've created from actually being a note buyer, creating your own assets and your own financing on them, to actually moving and doing it yourself, to fund managing, and now running and owning and operating a conference that is starting to make real waves in our business. So we're stoked for you.
And I'm so excited to have you guys there. When I was looking at different sponsorships and who I wanted to have at the conference, Revolve was one of the top of my list. We've known each other for a long time. We've done a lot of business together, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more in the future.
And same.
Awesome. So as we wrap up, I have one question that I like to ask folks whenever I see them, just because I like to hear their answers and their perspective. So it's going to be a little challenging because you only have one word. Okay, so in one word, what is your top concern facing the real estate market and note business today?
One word for challenge coming up. I'm going to go with misinformation.
That's good. I'll give you a minute here to kind of elaborate now that you give us that one word. Why is misinformation?
So misinformation just, I'll give you one example, especially in the note world. One of the biggest misconceptions is, or somebody will approach me with a note and say, like, what percentage of UPB will he give me? Oh boy, that's not how it's done. So if that's what you've learned, we need to relearn that, because that's not how it's done. It's not a percentage of UPB. It's not a percentage of value of the property. It's based on note numbers. So what's the term? What's the interest rate? When was the start date? When was the last date paid? When's the next due date? When, how long is it going? Is this a 30-year note? How much seasoning does it have? Like, there's a lot that goes into it. So just making sure that you have the correct information going in.
Very good. Well, Nathan, thanks for joining us today on Passing Notes. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you in Nashville.
Good seeing you.
Absolutely. Man. Good. Thank you.
Well, Chaz, that was a great interview there, and got us pretty excited about, turning on the country music playlist so that we can get ready to hit Nashville. And, I thought it went well, and I'm looking forward to going. And what are your thoughts?
I think there's this conference push that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years are starting to be in locations where they're kind of bleeding in both the personal and the business side of what we're doing. So I find that it being in that location, allowing you to potentially bring your significant other for a weekend trip, but also to be able to really be impacted with learning about a different, diverse business that is actually counteracting what we're starting to see as headwinds. Right? You're seeing inflation up. You're seeing rates up. You're seeing the cost of goods up. We talked about affordability being a real issue. And now you're starting to learn about a business that hedges against all of these issues and helps people to profit off of them. Yeah, this is a conference you kind of want to be in. And a guy like Nate that has really been able to been in it since 2009, 10, to now actually leading the charge on conferences that are kind of really starting to make waves. I mean, talk about a journey. So folks that are listening can actually do the same, but you got to learn. You got to get in. You got to really start sensing the space and seeing who's behind it. So couldn't be more excited to get out there.
Well, awesome. So we talked earlier about passive and active investors. So if you're an active investor and looking to buy notes, trade desk at revolvecapital.com. And if you're more passive, go to revolvecapital.com and you can learn all about investing in one of our funds. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on Passing Notes. Be sure to like and subscribe so you'll see our next podcast coming up. And Chaz, it's always fun.
Cheers, Bob.